Hello, Miss Emily. Do we want to show everybody what's in the garden this year? All right, so in this bed, I have, first of all of the herbs and everything in the marigolds are on the outside. This is to help with pest control because I have more problems with pests in this garden than I've ever had in my life. In fact, I've never really had issues with pests before. And for whatever reason in this yard, I have nothing but pests. I'm fighting them all the time. So I have a good variety of herbs out and then also marigolds. And so hopefully that will help. But this is currently my radish bed. I did sow some green beans in here last weekend. So this will be my green bean bed this year, which is why it has this over it because that will keep the rabbits from getting into my green beans. I will say that this year has been a very, very bad year for lettuce because I threw some lettuce seeds and kale seeds and then Swiss chard in these beds. And I did see a couple of little Swiss chard sprouts whenever I was thinning my radishes a couple of days ago. And that was it. So every year I feel like the lettuce does worse and worse. So next year I'm going to start it indoors from seed in February and then plant out the already sprouted plants in March. I don't know what is going on. I used to be able to just scatter lettuce seed and it grew and took off, and it's just not happening anymore. But this bed last year was my green bean bed, and now it is my pepper bed. Last year I had peppers and zucchini together, but I've been trying to grow zucchini every year that I've lived here, and it never produces anything, and all it does is draw squash bugs, and so I end up fighting squash bugs and get nothing in return. So I've decided I will no longer be growing zucchini in this garden. I don't know why it doesn't do well, it just doesn't. So this year it's all peppers. I do have some more herbs that are currently growing in the greenhouse, which will join this bed when they're a little bit bigger. Right now the roots are so small and tender that the snails and slugs would just ravage them. I'll take a little moment to appreciate my chives, which are getting ready to bloom any day now. I love the flowers on these. And this is the big clump of chives that I took out of that they were growing in a pot for years and years, and I just took them out of there and plopped them into this one. But I have several garlic chives that are still teensy in the greenhouse that will also be set out soon. And then this is my onion bed. I have the leeks planted around the outside, and then I have actual yellow and red onions inside, and then some marigolds to help with pest control. I will be putting some slug and snail bait out because they will absolutely ravage any kind of like tender roots or anything in here. And then in this bed, I have all of my carrots because this is a double height bed. So there's plenty of space for the carrots to shoot down. And then I have some more herbs on the outside. I've got thyme and sage. This sage actually made it over winter and looks like it's going to be blooming soon. And then more chives, more carrots. This is the sage that I had indoors over winter and just recently stuck it back out. And then this is the new part of the garden for this year. And I have pretty well everything in here that I need to have. The only thing, I need to pick up some butternut squash plants because I forgot to get seeds and start those. And I tried to start my squash early this year because last year it just gets so hot here in the Midwest now. We used to not have summers this hot. My birthday is at the end of June, and it would always be like mid-80s and really nice weather, and I would take off work for that week, which I still do, but it was always really nice and enjoyable to be outside, and it's just not anymore. By that last like full week of June, we now have temperatures that soar into the 90s, and then we'll have heat indices of usually 110 plus, like it's 110 to 115, and it stays that way all the way through August now. We used to have the occasional and rare day where we would have a heat index over 100, and now it's normal. And it's not just over 100, it's not 101, you know, that's a normal day now. And you know, the high heat is when it hits 110 or 115 for the heat index here. And it's been that way for the last few years. That seems to be the new normal. And so I have to try to account for that, because the one thing about pumpkins is they really don't do well in that kind of heat. They try to fruit, and the fruit will just wither up and fall away once it breaks 90 degrees. So I am hoping that by starting them early, because normally you just direct sow them into the ground about May 1st. So I started them indoors in the middle of March so that they would be ready to plant out by the last frost date, which is usually about April 10th around here. And they're still not as big as I would like them to be right now, but my hope is that they will start to flower by June 1st, because those flowers then produce the fruit. And so the way it works is you'll see like a little bitty fruit and it will form a flower, and then that flower will open, and that way it can be fertilized. So as long as it gets pollinated before we have the high heat, that fruit should grow. And as long as we have a pollinated fruit that has started to grow before that heat sinks in, that will resolve that kind of withering away. So I'm trying to get to that point before it gets hot. I don't know if it's going to work. I still may need to start them even earlier next year. Time will tell on that. But that's what I'm trying to do. So I have those out in this bed, and I just need to figure out what I'm going to do to trellis them, because they vine, like the vines on acorn squash and pumpkins and even butternut squash, which I don't have out yet, but they can get up to 30 feet long. And so I need some sort of a trellis system, and I don't really want to spend money buying something, especially, you order that stuff from Amazon and it's either plastic or it's metal that rusts. I had a little trellis last year that was like plastic coated metal, and it's already rusted, and some of the legs and stuff are broken on it this year, so I can't use it. I used it for one season and had to throw it away, and I don't want to do that again. So I may go out to the farm and see if I can find limbs, which should be pretty easy because with the ice storm this year, there should be limbs everywhere, and see if I can just build like a teepee style trellis for these or something. We'll figure that out, but right now I don't have to worry about it because they're not vining yet. But let me show you around. So here I have more marigolds and nasturtium and basil, of course, to try to keep the pests away, because those squash bugs will also ravage all of these pie pumpkins and acorn squash. But I am going to do something a little different this year. I'm going to get some beneficial nematodes and put in the soil. That may not keep the bugs off of them, but what it will do is they like to lay eggs in the soil, and those beneficial nematodes will eat and, well, I shouldn't say eat. Basically, they infest, like they're a parasite. They infest their hatchlings, so it keeps them from reproducing. So I'm going to give those a try this year, and I have yet to buy them. I'm going to probably wait until about May 1st and make sure that all of my stuff is out and we have good conditions. But anyhow, I have thyme, which I'm keeping in pots because it likes to spread like wildfire. So I want to keep the root system kind of contained. And I have some borage and more marigolds. And then this is my acorn squash. More thyme, more borage, more marigolds. And then I have another nasturtium here. And then on this side is the part that I'm excited for, because I've tried doing bachelor buttons before and they did not do well starting them indoors. So this year I decided to get those pots that are compostable, and I just planted them straight into the ground, and they are doing well. So I am really excited to see these grow up and get big and pretty. So basically a border for this side of the greenhouse. And then over here is my tomato bed. So I have two kinds of cherries. I have a sun sugar here, which I really wanted the sun gold, but they didn't have one. I did buy some sun gold seeds that I will be starting next year and putting out. I tried seed starting tomatoes this year, and I decided to try the new soil blocking method. For whatever reason, it didn't work for me. Everything that sprouted in it just within a few days rotted and died. So I'm probably not going to try that again, as much as I like that method to try to keep from having to reuse pots and all of that kind of stuff, and definitely keep plastic use away. But that one is a sweet cherry. And then over here I have a big boy, and this one is a celebrity. Back there is my one heirloom. It's a Mr. Stripey. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. That is the only heirloom that I have, and the reason for that is because it's the only one I have found that has truly been disease resistant, because I do have blight in my garden that I fight every year, and like Brandywine and Cherokee Purple, and I forget some of the other varieties I've tried, but they did not survive well with that fungus. And then this one right here is an early girl. And then of course I have tons of basil and marigold and some more nasturtium, and I believe a borage plant somewhere in this mess all around it. So hopefully we will have a really good and successful garden year. I definitely have a bigger garden. This is the biggest garden I've been able to have since I've been here. My biggest garden ever was when I lived out in the country in my hometown before I ever moved down here. And even in the house I bought in town there, I had a pretty good sized garden because I had a good level flat yard with absolutely no trees around to obstruct anything. So it was full sun all day long, every day. I didn't have issues with pests. I didn't have issues with disease. So gardening in the past was always very easy. And this yard has been a challenge because trees have kept me from having enough sunlight to really have a lot of success with the garden here. So I get, you know, half, if not even less than half of the amount of produce out of a garden than I used to. I used to just have gobs and gobs and gobs of everything to the point where it was more than I could use and I was giving it away. And I've had the opposite problem here. I've barely gotten enough to even be worth my time. I mean, I enjoy gardening, so it's always worth my time, but you get my point. And then on top of that, I've had pests, especially squash bugs. They find me every single year. So I've had a lot of issues with that. And then the slugs and the snails, I've never had issues before like I have with those here, and I can't get rid of them. And the pill bugs. And those, you know, not only do they like to eat your lettuce leaves and get into your strawberries, but anytime you plant out a plant, I've had to learn to start mine earlier and let them grow up and be bigger before I put them into the garden, because if they are still young and have very tender roots, they will just ravage the roots and the plant will die before it even has a chance. So those are issues I've never had before. And then, you know, the other thing is just the blight, and I don't know where it came from. You know, supposedly it just blows in on the wind. And so it settled in. This will be, I think, my 4th year of dealing with it. I never had that before either. And so I end up spraying all summer long every couple of days with copper fungicide to keep my plants alive. So this will be another year of dealing with that, I have no doubt. I was just explaining how to get rid of blight, and I intended to do that last fall. But when the tree fell on my house at the end of September, you know, I was forced out of the house. I had no water, no electric, nothing here. So the garden pretty much just got abandoned, and I was not able to properly break anything down or be able to, you know, try to treat for the blight. So I am hoping to do that this year. But it is going to be more difficult because now, instead of just having 3 garden beds to cover, I'm going to have a good stretch of ground as well. So we will see how that goes. I may be fighting blight for the rest of my life, but despite all of the challenges of gardening at this house, I will never stop doing it. And this year I have actually planted a ton of flowers. I've got rose bushes. You saw the bachelor buttons I told you about, like the bee balm. I have borage, chamomile, sunflowers. I've got a ton of dahlias, and I have those planted. I've kind of redid my little flower bed in the front. I've put out a ton more hydrangeas. So I'm focusing a little bit more on a flower garden now rather than just the vegetable garden, because I just feel like that is going to be less painful for me going forward. And I don't have to worry about vegetable or crop production, because I'm largely still buying most of my produce because my garden just really doesn't produce very much. So I may be kind of slowly transitioning over to doing more of a cut flower garden just for that purpose or that reason. But anyhow, it is time for me to clock into work now, so I'll catch up with you on my lunch break.
Hi, Emily. You coming to see what's going on, babies? Huh? Hi, Shuggies. love to get a hold of those, but we're not gonna let you.